Synthesis Weave by Rexx Deane, Chapter 2. As Sebastian hit the bottom of the shaft, he jerked awake. He could do without nightmares, especially before being dragged in front of his supervisor. According to the bedside clock, it was 03:10. He lay on his side, watching the minutes roll by until he lost consciousness. Somehow he woke before his alarm and got ready for work on time, but the disturbed night's sleep had left him more tired than before he'd gone to bed, and with Bannock wanting to speak to him about something, the morning didn't look promising. The office was unusually quiet when he arrived. His co-workers looked away from him when he met their stares. It was the sort of expression you'd expect to see on people's faces at a family funeral. He hoped he wasn't about to walk into his own. He approached his supervisor's receptionist. "I'm here to see Bannock." The woman tapped away at her keyboard. "Please take a seat." He sat on a low box seat opposite the desk, picked up the info slate from a nearby table and scanned the day's headlines to distract himself from whatever lay ahead. More terrorist bombings on the outlying colonies. He sighed. "What's that?" the receptionist asked, looking up from her work. "Those idiotic ITF bastards again. They bombed one of the far colonies trying to get rid of alien influence. I don't know what their problem is. My great-great-grandparents were on one of the Glaisi expeditions." "Which one?" 682B, the one they found the first node on. Bernardi first contact." Sebastian's heart skipped a beat. "The fluorescent nightingale? You never told me that." Her mouth twisted in a wry smile. "You never asked. Anyway, if it wasn't for us finding that node after the Exodus, we wouldn't be out here now, and none of us would have jobs. And that's down to aliens." He grimaced. If he still had a job. "Did you read the Flying Dutchman article?" she asked. He scrolled down the page, but before he could begin reading, she chirped up again. "Something's been spotted in the Pegasus constellation, moving at near light speed. Nobody's got scans of it, but it's been seen on and off over the last 60 years, heading towards a group of uninhabited systems." "What do they think it is?" "A ghost ship. Seriously, people would be mad travelling that fast in this day and age. I wouldn't want to do it, not for a long trip." "Me neither." He shuddered at the thought of losing family to the ravages of time and put the slate down. He didn't want a head full of depressing terrorism or paranormal nonsense, not if he was about to fight for his job. "She's ready to see you now." His stomach fluttered, and to calm himself he imagined the receptionist had done her makeup without a mirror. Her wonky lipstick made her look like an inadequate clown. Suitably distracted, he smiled, but as she walked into the office his face fell. Bannock sat at the long black glass desk. To her left sat a man Sebastian had never seen before. He was severe and gaunt, with wide narrow eyes, high cheekbones, and a thin mouth to match. His short black hair was oiled or gelled and stuck to his scalp, giving his fringe a serrated look. His uniform was a prominent combination of charcoal, grey and white. "Spec Ops." The man attempted to smile. It would have looked warmer on a crocodile. Bannock gestured to the solitary chair opposite. Sebastian sat down and folded his arms and his hands in his lap, trying to hide their trembling while his stomach quietly knotted itself. Bannock leaned forwards on the desk and laced her fingers together. "Let's get down to business, shall we, Mr. Thorson?" "This is Agent Marcus Gladwin of Spec Ops," she said, gesturing to the man. "Firstly, I have to inform you that your duties have been allocated to several other members of the security department." "Mr. Thorson," the agent said, "your time working here as a security programmer has come to an end." Sebastian's mouth fell open. He tried to speak, but the knot in his stomach got tighter and his throat dried, choking him off. How was he going to pay for Eric's education without a job? What was he going to do instead? How was he going to live? The agent put his hand up. "Please let me continue." It was hard to stop shaking, but Sebastian forced his mouth to close. He fixed his gaze on Agent Gladwin's piercing black eyes and nodded. "The other team members will now take over your non-specialised duties." Agent Gladwin paused to take a drink from the glass in front of him. "And you, Mr. Thorson, have been chosen, based on your psychological profile, for a new security position on the station. It shouldn't interfere too much with your day-to-day duties, although they will take a lesser priority. You will still report to Bannock for your station duties when required, but for others to me. Think of Spec Ops as an extension of your scope of work." The statement hit Sebastian like a brick to the face. They were offering him a Spec Ops job? "I'm pleased to meet you, Agent Gladwin, but I don't understand. Why my psychological profile? I thought my test results were awful. I thought I was here to be made redundant." "Quite the contrary. We always look for those with a specific mindset, an ability to readily pick up new skills and think outside the box. The test you took when you applied for your current post indicated that you'd have these traits, and we've been watching you for the last few weeks to see if this was indeed the case. I apologise for causing you any undue stress. We don't publicise when we're about to recruit. People would intentionally tailor their behaviour if they knew." A wave of relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. How had he not known that someone had been watching over his shoulder? "I put your name forwards for Spec Ops after some of your most recent projects impressed the security board." Bannock grinned. It had been her watching him. No wonder he hadn't suspected a thing. Yes, quite. Gladwin cast a fiery glance in her direction. Rather than interviewing potential recruits in the traditional manner and putting them on probation, we give them an introductory task to complete. A uniform and other equipment will be deposited in your locker shortly, and Bannock will forward the details of your allocated shuttle to your terminal. You'll also be given your own office for privacy purposes. I suggest wearing your uniform at all times during official business. It has a certain weight behind it. Sebastian reeled. It was a lot to take in. A shuttle? All special projects and operations employees get their own personal shuttle for use on assignment. Gladwin waved his hand in the air. Saves on red tape and is more efficient if they have their own vessels, given the dynamic nature of the work they do. I see. He still hadn't caught up with the bit about the uniform. Gladwin dismissed Bannock with a wave of his hand. She pursed her lips, grating the chair backwards as she rose. He returned the expression with an unflinching stare and waited until she'd gone before speaking again. Your task is to analyse a new technology for us, recently acquired from a terrorist cell that was developing it secretly back on Earth. We don't know whether the item is functional or not, nor do we know what its purpose is, but the technicians tell me it doesn't contain explosives, so you're cleared to work on it. The item will be delivered to your locker along with the other equipment. The box is print-locked to your thumbprint for security. Sebastian nodded. We usually pair up agents with those of complementing skills. It's often most effective to allow agents to select others to work with, but given the distinct lack of other Spec Ops agents on the station, I'll allow you to choose another station employee to bring on the project instead. Remember, this is a test of your resourcefulness, not specific knowledge, and a large part of resourcefulness is knowing who to trust and how to get the most out of those whom you do. He went to ask a question, but the agent spoke first. Do not speak to your co-workers about this assignment. It is for you and your chosen partner only. He craned his neck to look past Sebastian. This includes your supervisor and higher-ranking staff. Now, do you have any questions? No, I think that about covered it, although I don't understand why this task doesn't go through normal research channels. We fear terrorists may be using this technology in their attacks. Spec Ops often has a need for discretion, and on this occasion we cannot afford the potential security leaks associated with using third-party research companies, especially when insurgents could be anywhere. I understand. It was the reason Sebastian was employed to develop the station's security software in the first place. So, who would you like to have work with you? He shrugged. Who should I choose? Gladwin tapped the desk with a finger. As Spec Ops assignments often involve a lot of travel, sometimes to dangerous places, I suggest you choose someone with whom you could trust your life, someone adaptable and whose skills complement your own. I know just the person. He held out an info slate. Put the name there, he said, pointing to a box on the presented form. Sebastian typed in the name and handed it back. Born 2228, ex-Marine with honourable discharge. Oh. The agent read the form and raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. Not sure how that'll work out, but EarthSec says the records are clean. Very well. He stood and held out his hand. I very much look forward to working with you in future and seeing your results. As do I. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been nice meeting you, Agent Gladwin. Sebastian rose and they shook hands. He turned to leave and Gladwin caught his arm. As I said, your normal work duties take a lower priority. Any time you spend on work in relation to your assignment will be paid for. The same goes for your partner. This is effectively a research assignment, and research takes time, effort, and often legwork. I imagine your partner might need a little help, so focus on those needs first. Feel free to use any resources necessary. I need you to be an effective team. Sebastian smiled and thanked Gladwin again, and as he left the office his palms began to sweat. To work under his own steam again without boundaries. Freedom, but what a responsibility. He made his way out of the office and Bannock appeared from nowhere, arms folded, her stony expression giving nothing away. The equipment's being delivered to your locker. I imagine you have a lot of work to do, Thorsten, so you better get to it. I expect everything finished before you start working for Spec Ops. He nodded and stepped around her on his way to his desk. His own office. He was surprised to even still have a job. He worked fervently, putting the finishing touches to several long-standing projects. One thing he didn't want was her breathing down his neck. And by mid-afternoon the jobs were complete. He couldn't wait to see what was in his locker and finally be out from under her thumb. He walked through the open archway of the changing room and past the aisle of benches. The blue brushed metal walls watched his every move on his way to his locker. If only Gladwin hadn't told him about the terrorists and had just given him the box with no information. He touched his palm to the lock and his bladder tightened. The locker door swung open. His casual clothes hung at the front. Nothing seemed out of place. His old canvas rucksack slumped in the corner triggered a vague memory, something recent, but he couldn't place it. He'd had the thing since his 8th birthday. He'd sat playing in the sun on his terrace outside his family home, pushing a toy shuttle across the grass. He looked up at the trees in the recovering forest on the edge of the urban zone as a car silently pulled up to the gate. A tall, elderly man with white hair climbed out and hobbled up the path on his walking stick. Sebastian ran down the steps, arms outstretched. "Afi!" "Shh, don't let your mother hear you speak Icelandic. Speak Galak." "Hello. Sorry, grandfather." Freeman bent down and squeezed him tight. "Happy birthday, Sebastian." He turned Sebastian around and nudged him back towards the house. "Go on, I'll be up in a minute." Sebastian ran up the steps and sat cross-legged in the front of the white wicker chairs. Dishes clattered in the kitchen and Sebastian's mother ran down the steps past him, her white dress shining. "Freeman, it's good to see you." She gripped the old man's arms and pulled herself up to kiss him on the cheek. "Sigrid, my dear, how are you doing?" Freeman's white grin glinted in the sunlight as he turned towards the house. "I assume Thor's at work again?" She sighed. "He takes all hours the gods send lately. Michael was playing up, so he took him to work after the party." Freeman shuffled up the steps and took the seat next to Sebastian. "I'll get a drink," Sigrid said, patting Freeman on the shoulder, and made her way to the house. "I have a present for you, Sebastian," Freeman said. "I want you to look after this. Take it wherever you go." He leaned forwards and hooked a beaten-up canvas backpack with leather straps from his shoulder and handed it over. Sebastian's eyes widened. "What is it?" "My great-grandfather's pack. He used to take it with him when he went exploring." "Open it." He fumbled with the heavy buckles on the top flap, loosened the rope that drew the neck shut, and put his hand in. Something cold met his touch, and he snatched it back. "It's okay, take it out, it won't bite." He reached in again and pulled the object out. It was enormously heavy in his small hands. "What is it?" "It's an antique miner's lamp, a Davy lamp. Let me show you." Sebastian handed the lamp back, and the old man turned it in his hands. The light caught on the shiny brass base and fixtures. "This is nearly 400 years old, so I want you to look after it carefully." His knotty finger pointed to a dent in the side of the black cowl at the top. "The badge has fallen off, and you can see where the lettering's worn away. It says 18-something. That's when it was made." "Wow! How does it make light? Does it have a battery?" Freeman laughed. "No, it uses liquid hydrocarbon fuel. Do you know what that is?" Sebastian scratched his head. "The fuel old cars used to run on?" "Good lad." Freeman rubbed the boy's head. "At least you're paying attention at school. You'll probably never see it lit in your lifetime." The gnarled fingers turned the lamp over and pushed a lever on its base. Sebastian watched as Freeman demonstrated opening the glass. He imagined clambering through dark tunnels, shining a light ahead of him like his great-great-grandfather might have done, like his heroes from the movies or the characters in his grandfather's stories. "Can I go and play with it now?" "I don't see why not. Go on." He put the lamp and toy shuttle in the pack and slung it over his shoulders. It came almost down to his backside. He giggled with excitement, ran down the steps around the back of the house, and crawled under the terrace to watch his grandfather through a split in the floorboards. Freeman grinned and sat back to write in his worn leather journal as Sigrid came out of the house carrying a tray of glasses and pitcher of lemonade. "Where's he gone off to now? You didn't let him go to the wilderness, did you? I wish you wouldn't keep telling him those stories about giants and magic. You'll have him thinking the gods are looking out for him." Freeman looked up from his notes. "Oh, let the boy play, my dear. He'll be fine." His wrinkles deepened and he shook the book in her direction. "There are much worse things in the universe to worry about than wild boar and rutting deer." The pack and lamp had stayed with Sebastian after that, and he still felt bad that his grandfather got the blame for letting him run off. The childhood desire for adventure rose in his veins, and this time, rather than stifle it, allowed the urge to wash over him. Now that he was Spec Ops, his desire to travel might finally become a reality. He put the rucksack back in its place and caught the silvery glint of metal at the back. He slid his clothes to one side on the rail to reveal a Spec Ops uniform hanging behind them. His eyes followed the uniform down to the bottom, where a small metal box sat along with several other items. He picked up the box, a cube of approximately 3 inches with a print lock on the front, and it weighed heavily in his hand. The other objects consisted of a ruggedized info slate, a medical kit and nanobot injector, a pair of AR glasses, and a handgun. A gun! He'd only used one a few times, once as a child when his father had shown him his service pistol, and later when he'd taken the basic security training in weapons, armor tech, and tactics. He'd proven to be less than confident with them. It would probably be wise to book a few hours on the practice range if he was to carry one. Resourcefulness is part of the test, he reminded himself. The uniform on the rail wasn't particularly colourful. Charcoal grey and with a white panel that ran across the top of the chest and down the arms. White panels also ran down the sides of the abdomen and legs. The outer skin was rubbery and segmented into soft hexagonal cells that bulged in their centres. He draped a leg of the suit over his palm and punched it with the other hand, and the air around the impact immediately became rigid, and a fraction of a second later returned to its previously flexible state. A non-Newtonian N suit. He'd never seen one up close before. He grinned and turned it round to inspect the design. It was stylish despite the lack of colour, still a vast improvement over his regular uniform, and at least a fraction of the weight of the traditional ballistic armour. He pulled the suit on. Its stretchy fabric fitted well, and was immediately comfortable. Within the collar of its porous inner lining was a small cap. He flipped it open, and out popped the end of a plastic tube. A drinking tube? He smoothed the uniform down, fastened the unilock seal, and slid his hand down his thigh. No pockets. How's he supposed to carry anything? On the rail next to where the suit had hung was a belt with several small pouches and a holster. The equipment, with the exception of the info slate, might fit in all those pouches. Evidently he was to keep the sidearm on show, but how much of a target would that make him? He finished fastening the suit and stuffed his clothes into the rucksack along with the gun. His scalp itched at the thought of wearing it immediately, given he hadn't any practice, and slung the bag over his shoulder. Should he take the box with him? The idea of carrying some unidentified terrorist technology to his apartment made his stomach churn. Better leave it here for safekeeping, for now at least. He turned to the mirror at the end of the row of lockers. It was surprising how much more athletic he looked now everything was held in place properly. The horrible courier outfit he wore made him feel the wrong shape. Rexx would be so jealous. Speaking of which, he should probably give him a call before he finished his shift. He called up the security TI on his wristcom. Computer, locate Rexx Deane. Rexx Deane is in shuttle maintenance hangar bay 2. Of course he would be. He said he had to get the shuttle finished, and the Antari didn't have the nicest of tempers at the best of times. Rexx lay on a trolley underneath the shuttle, a position he hated especially since the accident. The stabilizer access hatch hung open, exposing a maze of cables, conduits and wires. A crack ran the length of the main housing of the stabilizer. It would need to be replaced. He picked up a spanner and reached in as far as his elbows. Turning his hands in the space, the tool collided with something. Ouch! He pulled his hand out and sucked his grazed knuckle. Time to use the CFD tools. There simply wasn't space, not with his hands. He picked up a nearby 6-inch metal rod and turned it on. A glowing orange screwdriver head appeared 2 inches from the end. Set a spanner. The tool changed shape and the screwdriver became a small C-shaped wrench. Off. Now there was space. He reached up inside the stabilizer. On and enlarged by 3 millimeters. The spanner head reappeared, larger this time, and he unfastened a pipe coupling. A small amount of thick gunk dribbled out and covered the glowing end of the tool. He pulled it from the workspace and grabbed a rag, but rather than wipe it, he held it over the cloth and switched off the head. It vanished. The tacky film fell onto the fabric, and he reached inside the machinery to unfasten another coupling. Incoming call from Sebastian Thorson, the nearby computer terminal said. He jerked forwards and bashed his head on the underside of the shuttle. Ow! What now? He slid out on the trolley from beneath the ship. Accept call. Rexx, I can't see you, came Sebastian's voice. I'm on the floor, still working on his damn shuttle. I thought you'd finished it. Just a couple more tweaks, then I'm done. It's got to be perfect. Don't want the Antari bringing it back and complaining. You know how bad they are. He pulled himself up fully from under the ship, sat up and wheeled the trolley over to the screen. What can I do for you? I was checking to see if you were free for drinks this evening, that's all. I have some news. Rexx weighed up the work that remained. I should be free when this is done. Call by in an hour and we'll go to the bar. Fine, I'll see you then. The screen went blank. He slid the trolley back under the shuttle to finish off the stabilizer. It took a little over half an hour to insert the remaining bits off the floor and another half hour to go around cleaning the greasy handprints off the lower part of the hull. The lift arrived and Sebastian entered. Shuttle maintenance, he said. It moved off and after a few moments stopped to let him out. Several yards down the passage he came to the door of the hangar where a sign read, Secure Area, Authorised Personnel Only. His palm print opened the door and he walked in. The shuttle maintenance hangar was vast, about the size of a sports stadium, at least 50 metres high by several hundred metres long. A metallic, oily odour reminded him of the lift system and he rubbed his hands on his thighs. The nearest workspace was the only one occupied, and floodlights created a pool of yellow light around the bay, while the rest of the hangar receded into darkness, giving the impression of a large cavern. The gleam of metal in the distance hinted at the presence of several other ships unattended. Sebastian approached the angular shuttle nestled under the warm lights of Repair Bay 2, where numerous tools and diagnostic devices lay strewn on the surrounding floor. A rhythmic banging came from underneath, interspersed with the occasional flash and bout of cursing. He bent down to where the noises were coming from. Suppose Karen told you the news first, did she? What news? I haven't seen her, came a voice with a faintly Australian accent. I got promoted. An oil and grime-covered head with hazel eyes and black hair combed into a wide mohawk popped out from under the shuttle. How can you get promoted? What is it, Security Programmer Plus? It's a new position. Rexx slid back under the shuttle. In Spec Ops. What? A loud bang reverberated from the hull, followed by another bout of cursing. Rex's head popped out again, this time rubbed by the back of a greasy hand holding a constrained field tool. He stopped rubbing his forehead, turned the tool off, and wiped the grease from his hands with a rag. At this rate, I'm going to have to start wearing a padded helmet. He slid out from under the shuttle up to the waist and gestured at something behind Sebastian. Bring me my wheels, will you? My shift's over. Sebastian brought the wheelchair from beside the tool chest and put the brakes on. The mechanic slid himself out to reveal his oil-streaked olive overalls ended at the knees with a trailing length pinned back under his thighs. Rexx climbed into the chair and, leaning to one side, whispered, "How the hell did you land yourself a job in Spec Ops?" "It never occurred to me to ask before," Sebastian said as they made their way down the corridor to Rex's apartment. "But why don't you get bionic legs fitted or have some transplanted, or even that new stem cell cloning?" "That's why I liked you from the day I met you. You never asked. You just accepted me without being patronising or pitying." Rex's eyebrows flattened. "So why ask now?" "I'm just curious, that's all." Rex's jaw muscles pulsed. "I can't have transplants. The anti-rejection drugs won't do me any good, and I don't qualify for stem cell clones because of a complication. That's why I can't use prosthetics. I'm ill." Sebastian stopped. His throat tightened. "What do you mean ill?" Rexx stopped and turned to face him. "I got infected with a parasitic virus during my accident. It's weakening the bones in my legs and knackered my immune system. That's why I can't get clones or transplants. The anti-rejection drugs would drop my immunity to 0 and probably kill me." Sebastian almost couldn't speak. "Nanobots don't help. They tried. It's a parasitic virus, intelligent enough to avoid them." No wonder Gladwin was dubious about his choice of partner. "I never knew." He went to put his hand on Rex's shoulder. Rexx slapped it away and pushed off. "Quite right. Besides, I'm used to my body now." "So when you say ill, are you going to die?" He glared at him. "Don't talk stupid." Sebastian swallowed his feelings. Rexx was his best friend. Who would he... It was no good. He had to shift the topic. "Why stick with the manual chair?" "How else am I supposed to get exercise? Anyway, plenty of people seem impressed with these." Rexx stopped wheeling and flexed his huge biceps. "We shouldn't feel pressure to fit in, to be like everyone else. We all have to wear our scars or we repeat the same mistakes. I don't want to cover up and hide. It doesn't affect anyone else." Sebastian remained silent. What about if it affected him? "It's funny you should mention my chair. They still won't let me do field repair because it's too cumbersome on uneven terrain. I don't really want to build yet another, so I started to work on something new." "Why'd you call by anyway? You could have just sent a message about the job and we could have met up later." "I wanted to see you and I thought..." Sebastian stepped behind Rexx as a large tentacled mass lumbered by in the narrow corridor, forcing him to one side, and he continued to walk behind him after it had gone. "Don't do that, you're making me strain my neck." He sped up and lowered his voice. "I thought it would be better to tell you the rest in person." Rexx grumbled. "Don't think I'm going to like the sound of this."